Welcome to Wednesday Q&A, where you all ask the questions and we answer with joy and curiosity and with our opinions, take them or leave them. But I'm joined by my brilliant, accessorized, and gorgeous co-host, Kristen Williams.
Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for that intro. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Q&A. Let's get started. We've got 3 great questions today.
Yes. Okay, this first one is from Uzmi. Low back tightness. Since I had a spasm / disc herniation 5 years ago, how do I alleviate it? Funny enough, I did a private today with somebody with this exact same thing. Well, a little bit different. She had disc herniation surgery. So the low back tightness is telling you something, and the herniation is the manifestation of that, right? So if you want to alleviate it, first you got to look at like why is there a tightness? And I say that in quotes because the tightness might not, a lot of times we say tightness. It's neural tension, it's fascial tension. Tightness, again, does not mean it's strong. And so it probably means there's some kind of misalignment in your your triple S, your spine, your posture. And often we see the thoracic spine is the largest segment of the spine, and that includes the ribs. And when you are sitting, standing, and there's any kind of movement of the ribs, either forward of your center of mass or a little bit behind your center of mass, it impacts the thoracic spine, but it often impacts what's above and below even more. And who knows what comes first? Maybe the neck went forward and then the ribs followed, or maybe the pelvis tilted and the ribs followed. But it's all connected. And this is where we're like a little potato head. Like we move one part and another part it's not gonna pop off, but it's going to also shift. So you have to look at, all the way from the way you're standing to the where your head is in space. And this is always what drives me crazy when the research, quote unquote, shows that posture doesn't, there's not a statistically significant relevance to pain or association with pain. But that's because there's so many variables that they can't isolate just posture. But posture is the biggest contributing factor with the sequelae of that, meaning all the fallout that happens when your posture isn't aligned. Because when your bones are not stacked in that most optimal way, where their surface area is, maximal, there's going to be more pull on the tissue on the one side and kind of less, the tethering is more on one side, which is probably your low back, than on the anterior side and through the body. So the way to alleviate it, my friend, is find somebody who can really assess how you're moving. So it's not obviously just posture, but postural is your starting point. And so it does kind of set the stage. It gives you a kind of initial reflex into what movement happens where and what muscles are firing in a sequential way. And that's called your habitual way. Your brain is always going to choose the most common path because that's what it knows. So if your most common path is when you lean over to get something off the floor, you really round your back, that sets people up for some movement of the disc posterior laterally, which is kind of the most common disc herniation. But you could also be like pitching your pelvis and pinching some parts of the low back, and other parts are getting like almost like a donut squish effect where some parts are getting tight and then the rest is pushed the other way. It's like as a response. So I guess it's less relevant to focus on the disc and more about the why the disc happened, because that's why you have this low back tightness. So you can work with somebody and you need to work on like how you're sitting, standing. Are you getting support for your low back so it's not contributing to this chronic tightness, meaning a lumbar pillow or support when you're sitting at your desk or sitting on your commute? How are you standing? Are you locking your knees back? That'll pitch your pelvis forward, which will really, again, tighten the back. And I see this, I know Kristen will have a lot to say too, all the time when I'm working with people and I just pick up their shirt so I can see the skin, and it's just the way. So the other thing is take a picture of yourself. just the way your skin is. You'll see it kind of like puckering. It tightens or it can be really rope-like. And some people you'll see like a huge divot where their spine is like in the trough, and these big paraspinal muscles or rectus spinae are just rigid. And that's telling you that there is a lot of movement forward of the rib cage, and those low back muscles are kind of constantly on put on demand. And they have an endurance component, but they're not meant to work solo, right? We're meant to really stabilize from all sides of the spine. So you got to work on the front, the deep abdominal muscles, work on your thoracic spine. If it's rounded, and a lot of people don't have enough strength in their posterior shoulders, shoulder girdle, scapular muscles that really help you hold yourself upright and help to hold the upper rib cage. So if that's collapsing, that's going to load the spine, the lower back as well. More to say, but I want to let my sister pop in here and talk.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed so much of it right there on the head. I mean, when we talk about that muscle tightness, especially after a disc herniation, I mean, usually when people experience that disc herniation, it's pretty traumatic. It is I bend over and I can't get up. And especially if this happened years ago, when quite frankly, a lot of our methodology has changed. Years ago, we were told not to move. And so our body, that muscle spasm is a way for the body to kind of brace. And what happens a lot of times is we get, to your point, Laura, this faulty wiring where it's a postural thing. Yes, you're shifted forward, so the body is always on contraction. Or if you only have it on one side, that that disc herniation side, it's because it's still kind of bracing there. And we need to teach the body to let that go, and that it's okay and that it's safe to let it go. Because unfortunately, a lot of times we'll develop a new normal where our body thinks, oh, I should be shifted. People don't even feel it. That's the most amazing thing. You see it all the time. Somebody has disc herniation. They are literally shifted away from that disc herniation. That's the body's way of protecting. But in the long run, that has ramification on the posture in general. And so I love your suggestion to really find somebody who can look at you through a really unbiased lens and take a look at how you're sitting, how you're moving, where are you strong? Where are you weak? Where are the soft tissues tight? I love how you talk about that. You can literally look at someone and you can see skin folds will tell you a lot if there's a shift in the body. Negative space, you'll have one arm that's just naturally kind of held away because it looks like it's being held away because the body's shifted. The ribs, people forget about these ribs. And when we think about it, like you said, Laura, this is the largest area of the spine. It's got this big rib cage attached to it. It is, when you're shifted forward, whether with an anterior tilt or, like you said, the hyperextended knees and the pelvis is pushed forward, you can imagine these erector spinae, they're hanging on for dear life. I kind of picture them like skiers on a ski rope. You kind of lean back into that just so you don't wipe out. So it's kind of the same thing that happens to those erector spinae, and they just get constantly on tension. And so working to break that habit, working to restore, good muscle firing. And that is harder than we think. You'd be surprised. It really does take a lot of manual cues, a lot of hands-on work where you can feel your body. I love how you said, take a picture of yourself, video yourself, where you might see, oh my goodness, I didn't even realize that I was favoring that side. Or look at your hips. Are your hips off on strength? Are you really either under or overutilizing one side? So as we can create more balance in the body, your body will give a sigh of relief. And it would love to let go of that tension in your back. And that disc herniation is long gone. Now, I mean, they have done MRIs where they don't know what happened to it. It's no longer there. So it can be reabsorbed by the body. Again, remember that an MRI and an X-ray, we talked about this last week, it's just a snapshot. So it could be that, your your posture changes. People, rehabilitate their posture, they rehabilitate their muscle tone and their strength. And it no longer is, to your point, that jelly donut pushed out. So as we come back, it's like, oh my gosh, where'd the disc herniation go? Well, it's because we're not in that position to push it, back all the time. So a lot of this is, we talk about, medicine as a science, and a lot of it is, but a lot of it isn't. It's an art. It's an understanding of movement. And by say art, I think of dance, of biomechanics. It's an understanding of movement. It's an understanding of balance. And if you give the body that, it will heal itself many, many times. So that's what I would say. Have somebody look at you, get some better balance in your body. You're going to be, it's going to be like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. And then you'll work on those things and your body will go, yes. And then everything will feel better.
It just came to mind when you're talking is like when you see those people who are balancing on stilts and walking. I don't know what they're called again, but
yeah,
you know what I mean? Yeah. Think about their posture is really good. It has to be because they're way up off the ground on a very small surface. And it's about balancing their center of mass. If they were rounded or arched or something, they would not be able to balance or move. And so we don't have that. We don't have to balance to that degree, but we should think about that. Like, how are we stacking our bones, aligning ourselves so that our center of mass is truly in the center. It isn't displaced forward or back. And think about those stilt walkers, because again, they couldn't be doing it if they were like off kilter. And that would be a dramatic version, but that's what our body is wanting, is more of this balance around that, where our center of mass is.
Great question.
And on to another one that has a lot to do with what we're talking about here. Natalie Chiovo asks, can you talk about having an ergonomic home? This is really interesting. We talk about ergonomics at work all the time. And so people do work from home, so we want to kind of capture all that. But do you have any right off the cuff tips about that?
I have plenty of tips. I also have some interesting stories about it too. Both Laura and I have very tall children. Our sons are 6'4", 6'5", and I forget until I see him how tall he is. And you just think the world's really not made for people that tall.
No.
And I live in Milwaukee, and we have the Milwaukee Bucks here, and a lot of the Bucks send their young children to my husband's school where he works. And so I see these gargantuan men, who are 6'10", 6'11", 7 feet. And I think, how do they live? Because their home is not ergonomic for them. Would you believe that they are actually downtown Milwaukee? They are creating, this is kind of funny, it's the 13th floor, because like in a hotel you wouldn't ever want to stay on the 13th floor. Sometimes they skip it. Well, for their away teams, they're renovating the 13th floor in this hotel and everything is taller. The ceilings are higher. It is built for basketball players. And I applaud that. I think it's hilarious. It's the 13th floor, but that those basketball players are going to be thrilled, because there's nothing worse than having your home not fit you. So when we talk about ergonomics, let's think about what can we affect. There's been a lot of changes in toilet seat height. If you ever have bought an old home, the toilet seats are like on the floor. So, which of course we think of squatty potty, that's better for going to the bathroom, but for someone to get down and up easily, that's a lot harder. So, we want to think about our seat height in our chair. We don't want the knees above the hips. We want them, 90 degrees, or even sometimes the hips a little bit above the knees. We want to think about it when Laura, you have some great videos on your Instagram in her kitchen of, things to think about when it's not just how your house is set up, but it's how you move. What are you choosing to do when you wash dishes, for example. How are you can you stagger your feet? Can you be off the side so you can keep a more erect posture? So, doing whatever you can to really, back to our last question, think about that stack. How can you stay better stacked? How can you be more optimally set up to utilize the strength of your legs versus those erector spinae, which are already your back muscles, which you're bending over, chopping vegetables. You could be there for 20, 30, 40 minutes sometimes if you're making a really intense meal. That is killer. So you know what? Take it to your table where you can sit in a good chair and do it. So I think part of ergonomics is a setup. It's getting your wrist neutral in your, at your keyboard. It's setting up, like my screen right now is on 2 books to get it up so I'm not looking down at it. And it's raised above because it is a laptop and I have a separate keyboard. It's things like that where I know I spend a lot of time here. So I would never spend this amount of time on my laptop because I would be looking down at it on my lap. I want it upright. I want a nice, set of my shoulders. But I think ergonomics also boil down to choices, and really thinking about it. Ergonomics, it's snowing outside right now. We're not going to get an accumulation, but someday we will. Thinking about it when I'm shoveling snow. I thought about it when I was blowing leaves. When you're doing something new for a prolonged period or doing anything for a prolonged period, you want to have that tension in your core, just a little bit of strength. You want to switch sides so you're not always doing something on the same side. So ergonomics is more than just setup. It's also, movement pattern decisions. What else do you have to say about ergonomics?
No, I love what you said, that it is like the setup is one part of it, but it's also that not staying in one position for one, setting yourself up that if it is a little bit kind of less optimal, that you are engaging, that you're using these as little opportunities. And they've shown that, housework, so to speak, has it can be a form of, movement exercise because of the way that, if you're vacuuming or folding laundry and picking up, it's how you do it. And some of it you can set up to benefit you, so if I'm folding clothes, I personally love to get on the ground and fold clothes because sitting on the ground is a great place to be. And I really highly suggest everybody gets on the ground more. But if that's not your jam, then set it up where you can fold clothes and it's not, like you're rounding over to do it. So it might be that you're sitting on your bed and doing it, or it might be that you pull up a chair and put it. I've seen my daughter do this, put it on a table and fold the clothes. If you're sitting for long periods of time, it's always, again, good to get up. It's good to change your position. It's good to have lumbar support if you need it. And as Kristen said, one of the most important things for computers is making sure that your eyes are at the same level as the screen and that the screen isn't below that, because we're so biased to let our head, it's heavy, right? It's so biased. Everything's in front of us, to let it hang down, to really keep it in position. So like those paraspinals we were talking about in the first question, we have them all the way up into the back of our skull. The suboccipitals just are like little reins. Please don't be doing that all day. So putting them in, sometimes even sitting against, if you're sitting and watching TV, okay, you can slouch, or you can use that as an opportunity to maybe not slouch, but just get yourself up against the back of we have a couch that backs up to a wall, and I'll just put my cushion there just to give my neck a stretch. So I'm not working per se, but I'm just optimizing the things that I'm trying to do throughout the day. So that was a great question though, but it's just, I think it's all the performance of the daily stuff you do at home, in addition to how you set up your workstation, is very important. All right, last question. This is from Stephanie. She is a lit yoga teacher. And this is the $1 million question we get all the time. Can you help me stand on my hands without a wall or fear? Da, 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 da. She puts a little heart on there. I know we would be just rocking it in so many ways, spiritually and financially, if we got paid for being able to just do that for people. And the answer is, we can absolutely help you, because we're going to help you believe that you can do it, and we're going to help you set up the motor mechanics to do it. And then the job for you is to practice it. I was talking about this with a neuroscientist, and it's like you have to do something so many, many times. I mean, they say 10,000 times, 8,000, whatever it is. And I think with handstands, there's such an eagerness. It's so fun. It's so wonderful. But we have to think of that as any other skill. You know, it's like learning a foreign language. I am never going to assume that I could just come in and have a conversational ability unless I am like logging in the hours and practicing and practicing and practicing. It's the same thing with a handstand. And that is not only getting the biomechanical, the neuromuscular patterning, but it's also getting the familiarity, because a lot of getting on the hands is scary because it's not familiar. It's like you've changed your vision. You're now looking at the ground, and probably your brain is very much wired. Like if you're looking at the ground, you're falling, and now you're on your hands, not your feet. It's very different. But use that too as an advantage, because when it's different, your brain is very heightened. So when you're doing it, visualize, because when you're visualizing, you're setting up the mirroring in the brain motor cortex for this action to happen. You're also going to probably tone down the loud noise of the fear center of the brain, the amygdala, and just keep saying to yourself, I got this, I got this. Don't rush it, because rushing it is trying to skip steps 1 through 20, and that will create actually more anxiety and give you in this fear mode. For those who practice with a wall, I am not a wall fan, but I absolutely understand. I would rather you practice with a wall than not try it, and also make yourself more fearful. The caveat is you aren't learning the motor patterns that you need to be out in the center without the wall. It's a different motor pattern. You know the wall's there. You're going to kind of overreach it most of the time. So if you practice with a wall nearby, don't think of touching, I always say, think of the wall as being electric, like an electric wire. You do not want to touch it. It is not something that's conducive. And that way you can at least start to develop the feeling of what it's like to be more upright and aligned without going to the wall and then trying to come off the wall. Because if you have that in your motor pattern, it is very challenging to do it in the middle of the room, because that's what you're going to do there, and it'll freak you out, and then you won't come back to it. There's a lot more to say to that, but more than anything, you've got to be patient. I taught myself how to handstand. I'd never done a handstand. I taught myself at 36, and it took me day in and day out. And I always say I did a roundabout way, and then I figured out if I actually worked on it biomechanically, figuring out where do my scapula are, really leaning into them and pushing off. So I teach a much more straight line, but it took a while. It really did. But I did it every day. I did do it on carpet to start off with. So maybe energetically, biomechanically, that can be more challenging because it's harder on your wrist. But mentally, that might have been a little bit easier on my mind. Like, oh, if I fall, I'm on carpet. So you could use that as well. Like find a surface, grass, carpet. It's not necessarily ideal, but for your brain, because that's the biggest problem right now is your brain, most likely. Anything more? I'm sure you got more.
And
yeah.
In my opinion, fear is the hardest obstacle to overcome. It's not strength. Nope. It's not range of motion. It's not. It's literally fear. That is the hardest obstacle to overcome. So I agree with you about the wall. I do like the wall. I started on a wall, but I never kicked up to the wall. So when I teach people, I'm like, if your feet touch the wall, that's like a,
right. That's the electric wire fence.
It is.
Yeah.
You will never get a handstand if your feet touch the wall. And I don't care if it's 1 foot, 2 foot, like you literally, I put it there and I'll tell people, put it there just for your brain, but not for your body.
For your comfort.
And so, and to your point, I think that you started talking about thinking of it in terms of biomechanics. That's what I did too. I really started to get the idea that it's my pelvis that matters. It's where my pelvis is. My pelvis has to get up, because And that's again where you have to stop thinking about the feet. So if you're kicking into the wall, you're thinking about where your feet are. So whenever I'm teaching someone, I won't say anything. Go ahead and just try it. And I'm like, what were you thinking about? And they're like, nothing. And I'm like, okay, try it again and think about something. And they're always like, so, what'd you think about? Well, I thought about where my feet went. Okay, well, don't think about your feet. Have you ever thought about where your pelvis is? And it's like, no, I have no idea where my pelvis is. And so, getting that connection to the pelvis helps. I absolutely, Laura, I did it on grass. I did it on turf. I did it on carpet, because there is hardwood floor, super scary. Hardwood floor in the middle of the room, super scary. So, but there's something about, I don't know. I felt like it wasn't going to hurt as bad.
Right. It's a softer landing. Yeah.
It's a softer landing, and you can kind of grab a little bit. Like there's a, that you don't initially get on the floor. And then don't forget about, your feet are very mobile. Like if you stand on one leg, watch how much your feet are moving. The same thing has to be readiness in the hands. People will try to do this handstand with like a super flat hand. And it's like, the fingers they're kind of your brakes. So you can start to learn to use your fingers like extensions of your palms to help brake you. And that was a big game changer for me. Like, oh, I can literally stop my forward progression by pushing into my fingertips if I'm going too far. I can increase my forward projection by pulling my femur into my pelvis to get my butt a little further if I'm not going far enough. But to your point again, this was hundreds of thousands of tries. And I too did it every single day. I tried to have fun with it. I have laughed, like if I could just create something that hung from the ceiling that gave people some safety, I'd be a billionaire, because because it's the fear is the thing. The fear is so hard to get over.
And what's funny is everyone says it in this like quiet voice as if they're the only one. Like, I got a handstand. I just can't do it because of fear. And I'm like, you and everyone else. So first of all, everyone listening, if you didn't have that fear, you're unusual. Like it's just unusual, right? And so if you have it, just know it's totally normal. Everybody experiences it. And I love what you said about using your hands. What I love about handstand is it gets you to really know yourself. And when we talked about like that whole idea of center of mass, like when you're standing or you're doing ergonomics, this whole wonderful podcast is wrapping around all this, but it's really, when you talk about that pelvis, your center of mass getting over and stacked on top of your rib cage and your shoulders. When you hit that sweet spot, people freak out because they're like, oh my God, this is because it's so
easy.
It's so, it's so hard until you hit that sweet spot. And then you're like a feather. And then that lightness makes you feel like you're falling. And it's like, celebrate it. Keep your legs staggered. I like that. That'll help you, Stephanie, just keeping one leg back and be really like, to me, a handstand, if you can get your pelvis over your shoulders, and I don't really care what the legs are doing to help you do that, that is key. And you could be like that for a while. I've seen people who stay like that for years. They love that kind of L shape or that kind of teeter totter or whatever, because it's just giving you the mapping of where getting the pelvis over the shoulders. And I love what you said, like think about bringing your thigh and up into the pelvis, like you're suctioning up, because that is going to have way bigger impact on getting the pelvis over. And for people who have a lot of restrictions, it will take time. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing. If you have, and I know you can speak to that from your hamstring stuff, like that you've talked about, is like, it's easier when you're freer in the back line, but posterior chain, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. Like sometimes I think having a little bit of restriction is better, because you kind of have to really be honest in your alignment.
No, you have to plan it. The class I taught on Tuesday was like ready for takeoff. It's on the Lit Daily, and it talks about my motor plan for getting on my hands. And it's literally like, I call your quads are your jet engines, like that's, I'm pushing, I'm not kicking. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my glutes are on and my core is on, but like I launch,
You got to push down to get up. Yeah.
push down to get up, and then you got to dive. So it's I was like talking about Top Gun, you name it. I was all this idea of like, really, there's an aerodynamic to it. And I will say, learn to fall out too. So if you don't know how to do a cartwheel, like even just starting with and it doesn't have to be a pretty cartwheel, but that comfort of, because the last thing you ever want to happen is to go up and then go over and
flip over like a wheel.
That is traumatic. And learning to lift up a hand and cartwheel out is big. And that's big to be able to do that in the grass. Because I mean, I've cartwheeled out of 100,000 handstands.
100,000. And the thing is too, is it's good for your body. We have these reflexes, protective reflexes. Like if you fell down the stairs, you don't just like put your arms out and fall on your chest. You have a reflex to put your hand up. You need that same reflex. It's just different because you're not used to it being on your hands, but you will develop it. And I can tell you, like, I will never fall in a weird way. Like I will always catch myself. You need those. So it's like a safety thing, but you need to practice it until it is more hardwired. But speaking of, we have so many classes on the Lit Daily. We have handstand workshops. We've got this one that you're talking about ready for takeoff. We have 5-day, we have every class, even if you never choose to go in a handstand, is preparing you for that. Yep. So check out our classes on Lit Daily. We have a 2-week free trial. If you haven't taken that option, go get it. Go to lityoga.com and just check on, try the free trial. Every class, from foundational to posture series to beginner series to building blocks to postnatal, everything is preparing you because it's organizing your body so that you can move it through space, whether it's on your feet, 2 feet, hands, forearms, whatever it is. So check it out. These were great questions. Thank you all so much. You can write us on Instagram at lara.hyman or kbwilliams99. Just send us a direct message. We screenshot it and put it in a little folder for our Q&As here. Or you can write us.
You can email. Yep, you can email us if you aren't an Instagrammer. You can email at support@lityoga, lytyoga.com. And those get forwarded to us as well. I star them in my inbox, and then we will get to it. So, please write us, send us your questions. We even may start asking you specific questions on certain topics. So, we're looking to answer your questions about your body, about your life, about living, about movement, and just really share as much as we can from our many years of experience together.
Yay. And we love it. So thank you all. As always, go check out Lit Daily, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Share with friends, share the love. And as always, we are pulling for you.